In 1982, floods basically went all the way up to Camp 9 on the Stanislaus and, for all intents and purposes, began the destruction of the river permanently. That was unnecessary, as you've talked about. The case for not operating the dam that way was clear. As you look back now from this vantage point, 40, 50 years later, what takeaway do you have of the decisions that were made about the Stanislaus?
Well, at the time of that flooding, but the 82-83 flood was a pretty big flood event. It was a high volume flood event, but not unprecedented. But what we could see happening is that the canyon was deliberately flooded. Instead of making the designated flood releases, the Army Corps of Engineers cut back its releases to capture, they reduced the flood release from where it should have been at 8,000 CFS to 1,000 CFS, and they kept it at...
They put the cork in the bottle.
Yes. And if they had kept it at 8,000, then it wouldn't have inundated the Upper Canyon.
Which would have left California's Decision 1422 still working, right, because the state walked away from that after the flood, saying it was moot.
So we could see that happening at the time. We knew what was going on, and we were trying to... And the Corps of Engineers were making fraudulent statements about the need to keep it to 1,000 CFS. And this is what I found the most outrageous behavior of. But what it tells us now is that the key to restoring the Upper Canyon is ensuring that the flood management of New Melones is integrated with floodplain restoration and habitat restoration in the lower river system, so that we can accomplish the good flood pulses for the ecosystem downstream while preserving and restoring the Upper Canyon.
In that effort, restoring the Stanislaus.org, there's also discussion of meeting some of the water supply needs by moving water downstream into underground aquifers in the lower river and finding a way to store water there and therefore avoid transevaporation, which is huge in a big reservoir, as well as doing this kind of floodplain management you're talking about.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about the Nemesis is it's a classic example of how in river management or water resources management nowadays, we're dealing with trying to retrofit obsolete, badly designed, aging infrastructure. That was planned at a time when the values of the environment were not considered at all, where the allocation of benefits from a project were distorted by the politics and the special interests. And I think there's an opportunity when you start rethinking the true societal and environmental goals of river management, of rethinking how you would actually reoperate New Melones. There's probably some great opportunities here to achieve some net benefits.
And that's the great case statement for the Restoring the Stanislaus organization that's now trying to move in that direction. You came out of all this and moved on to doing something much broader. Tell us just a little bit about that to finish up with.
So what was happening is the fight on the Stanislaus was not the only fight going on dams in the United States. There were a lot of other projects being proposed in a similar way based on obsolete ideas. These dam building bureaucracies, the Corps of Engineers and Bureau of Reclamation, in concert with the dam building industries, were just pushing Congress, who were writing blank checks to build dams in Tennessee and Idaho, all across the country. And there was opposition to these, just like groups like Friends of the River. And we would all meet there would be a convention in Washington.
The Dam Fighters Conference.
The Dam Fighters Conference. And environmental policies to set those up. And I was asked, I was, because of my professional background, I get the trade press, and I could see the model of the State Water Project, the Central Valley Project, the Tennessee Valley Authority was being replicated in other countries. And I was looking in the trade press and seeing how the problems we were trying to deal with here in California they were being imposed in other countries. So I was asked to give a talk at the Dam Fighters Conference on, I think I called it Damming the World. And out of that, we made a lot of contacts with groups in other countries. And right after the Stanislaus campaign ended with the filling of the reservoir, I got on a plane and I went to Tasmania and met with Bob Brown, the head of the Tasmania Wilderness Society, because in Tasmania there had been almost exactly the same fight going on to stop the Franklin Dam, which is a big hydro scheme proposed on the last big scenic river in Tasmania. Whereas we in California lost, they won. And I wanted to know what they did what was their secret of success.
And out of all of that came the idea to form International Rivers Network.
So out of our
as
conversation
a
with Bob Brown,
consortium for worldwide dam fighters and people looking for responsible water policy.
Yeah.
That's quite an impact.
Yeah, so and Bob Brown, he said really, when I said, well, shouldn't we be sharing these experiences? He was really supportive and became one of our early sort of enablers of the organization.
International Rivers and others,
Yeah, and interesting, Bob Brown himself became the head of the Green Party in Australia.
Interesting.
And one of the leading advocates of environmentalism.
Well, that's a long arc of an impact, but it did make sense because these things are truly global. So, thank you. That was great.